and beyond. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Astrid Wendlandt back to Fletcher. I know that you have a few familiar faces to reconnect with, and this is the first time that Astrid, you and I have met, and it's such a pleasure. I've heard so much about you, and I'm really excited to get to know you, but also get to know Miss Tweed. But before we delve into Miss Tweed and why and how luxury is going to conquer the world, let me tell you a little bit about Astrid. She graduated from Fletcher in 1999, and since then she has had a really interesting career. She's covered the luxury industry. She's the editor and founder of Miss Tweed, which is an online media company, and it's based in Paris, and it specializes in fashion and luxury. So we also want to understand your journey from Fletcher to fashion and luxury. Must be an interesting story there. But even before you got to fashion and luxury, you were with Reuters, you were with the Financial Times in London and Moscow. So I know that our Russia program is extremely interested in learning about some of your insights into what's going on in Russia. And you started your career in Moscow in the mid-1990s at the Moscow Times daily newspaper. And so a lot to learn about your life, career prior to Fletcher, while you were at Fletcher. And we know that some of your professors from the time are still here, and post-Fletcher. We also have a bunch of your publications from the Miss Tweed publishing house. A few of them are right here, and we'll learn a little bit more about what's here. But before we actually start a conversation, Astrid, let me invite our colleague from the Fletcher Russia program, Eric, if you want to say a few words about the Russia program, our collaboration, set the table a little bit for Astrid.
Sure, I would be happy to say a few words. So, Bhaskar, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. I'm Art Borkovsky. I manage Fletcher's Russia and Eurasia program right now in our fourth year of doing this. And this is one of our first in-person events after the last year of the pandemic. So, Astrid, it's a pleasure for us that you are here, that you made this trip all the way from France. The Fletcher's Russia and Eurasia program promotes teaching and research of Russia, Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, and Central Asia at Fletcher. And we also have collaboration with universities and think tanks all across the region. And of course, Astrid, given your previous experience in Moscow and across the region, we're very much looking forward to your insights. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we also have our colleague Edward Schumacher-Matos from the Murrow Center here. So this is indeed a cross-center collaboration that has brought you here, Astrid. So we're thrilled to have you.
It's the richness of Fletcher.
Absolutely.
I mean, Fletcher is the most cross-disciplinary, I think, school in the United States, and it brings the best of law, of international affairs, of business, of diplomacy. And the quality of the people here is incredible. You meet people from, State Department, career diplomats from Asia, Africa, all over the world, CIA people. I remember I was in class with people from the CIA, from the Satellite Observation Agency, and I felt that I learned just as much from the students than from my professors. And I think therein lies really the richness of Fletcher. Is you are challenged in your ideas and your preconceived ideas by the students as much as the professors. I came out of here really quite well armed, I must say, for what was going to happen afterwards, and this openness of mind and putting things together. And I think Fletcher is unique for that. So I feel this is really my school, and I feel so privileged to have been here and to have kept contact with so many people, because Fletcher is also a community. You're a Fletcher for life because you're part of that community, and you can be in any country in the world, and there will always be a Fletcherite somewhere who can help you or with whom you can exchange, and that's priceless.
Absolutely. So I think, Astrid, you said encapsulated so much about Fletcher that I think all of us can relate to. But before we go into Miss Tweed and your latest book, walk us back a little bit in time. What got you interested in Fletcher in the first place? What happened prior to Fletcher that brought you here? And then subsequently, post Fletcher, tell us a little bit about your journey from the Master of Arts in Law and Diplomacy to Miss Tweed and the world of high fashion.
So I applied to Fletcher because I felt, when you're a journalist, you're really a professional dilettante. And after 3 stories, you're called a specialist. And I felt that I was never really going to know anything really deep. And I thought my understanding of business was very weak. I mean, I studied political theory and Russian at McGill before coming here. And I was at the Moscow Times, and let's say a company was going to do an IPO, and I would call my French banker friends, "Hello, Jacques. So what happens when a company issues shares? I have 10 minutes. And I would try to understand the whole mechanics of the business. And it was written on my business card, business correspondent Moscow Times. And I was trying to really look professional when I wasn't. And I felt I was really out of my depth. And it was time for me to go back to school, because it's this humble moment when you feel that you're pushing over your weight. And I thought, okay, where can I go? And then, because I'm interested in international affairs, because I'm Franco-Canadian, passionate about Russia and Eurasian affairs generally, and and also European diplomacy. And I thought, well, I'm going to pursue my interests in European and global affairs while getting a deep understanding of finance and international finance. So thanks to Fletcher, I was able to take classes at Harvard Business School with MBA students, and that was a bit of a culture shock coming from the philosophy world, and you had to read business cases, and it was very different. But and I did a lot of accounting with Professor Laurent, and it really gave me all the tools that I needed afterwards, and I think it helped me get a job at the Financial Times when I was 26 years old. And like, ooh, Fletcher, HBF, well, okay, maybe we'll give an interview. And it got me in the paper. I was 26 years old, and the Financial Times really is, I think, the Harvard of journalism. You really learn there how to write.
You mean the Fletcher of journalism, but that's okay.
Sorry, sorry, I meant the Fletcher. But anyway, so I think thanks to Fletcher, I really got all I needed to also have that. You see, I think the world is so complex, changing so quickly, that if you learn a method, it's great. Law school, every school has its own method. Here, you learn several methods. You learn about negotiation, you have some core courses that everybody has to take, and then, the add-ons. But I think the common denominator is to really think multilaterally, not only in terms of relations, but in terms of disciplines. And you have law, you have, diplomacy, negotiation, history, and the understanding the history helps you understand the now and the future. And I think this is very much part of the conversation that I was having here with our professors, and thinking about ideas and what's happening. And I think Fletcher is the perfect place for that.
Yeah, so far I'm tracking, right? Because everything you just mentioned about your journey to Fletcher and to the Financial Times is all you can see a consistency. But then I'm thinking about does Fletcher have a center for luxury or fashion? This is not a particularly fashionable community, other than Professor Alan Hendrickson,
Yes.
who keeps the standards exactly where they need to be. So I'm sure there are many things you learn from Professor Hendrickson, both about diplomacy and about fashion. But tell us a little bit about how you got interested in fashion. Or maybe that was always part of your interest, but
Absolutely not.
Okay.
My interest is in mountains and skiing and Siberia, and because this other life that you don't know about is that I've been going on expeditions in the Arctic in Russia among the last nomadic reindeer herders.
Oh, wow.
And I wrote some books about that as well.
Mm.
And I left the Financial Times after 5.5 years because I wanted to move to Paris, and they had already changed the correspondence. So it means you have to wait another 5 years. And I thought, okay, FT is great, but Reuters is also a wonderful back then. It's changed quite a lot since, but it was really a great place to work. And I started there in 2004 after 5 years at the FT, and within a few years, they said, look, we want to promote you as senior correspondent. So it basically means that you edit a lot of people's stories, you do your own. And they said, we're creating this position, European luxury correspondent, and we would like you to apply. You know how it works? We would like you to apply. And you're like, luxury, what? Okay, I'll apply. And then I got the job. And in fact, it was a recognition of how important that industry had become. Because before it was consumer retail in terms of sectors, but the business of luxury has become a business of its own. And it's actually, this is what I argue in this book, it's become as powerful economically in terms of soft power, in terms of manpower, as the Google, the Amazons, the Microsofts of this world. And people dream of working for Google like they dream working for Chanel or Dior or Saint Laurent. And it's become a huge magnet for talent. So, and it's become also, if you think of the stakes, they're just like arms deals. We're talking about several $1 billion worth for this contract or this acquisition. So the stakes are huge. And we're talking about, I think LVMH, Louis Vuitton went to NSC that owns about 75 brands like Dior and Fendi and others. They employ nearly 170,000 people. Google employs just about 100,000. Yet you would think that Google employs many more. And also, I was saying it's a magnet for talent, but it's also an industry that is starting to have a political weight. And through brands, countries can now really leverage this soft power. And a few days ago, I was meeting with the head of the Comité Colbert. So it's the French lobby group for luxury brands. And she, Bénédicte Épinel, she was very shocked because 2 weeks ago, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, was making a big conference, France 2030. And what are going to be the industries that really are the future of France? So there was the French tech, there was nuclear, there was biochemistry, but there wasn't the French touch. And she thought, we're the biggest employers of France now. What's going for France? It's certainly not Airbus, right? The aerospace industry is not doing that. It's certainly not cars. Nobody's buying a car anymore. It's fashion and luxury and cosmetics.
And there's no such thing as French tech, by the way. Please go on.
As the Russians would say, an angel, angel prolетел, an angel passes by. So basically, Reuters gave me this job to, cover this, and I must say it was so intense that after 13 years, I thought, okay, I know so much about this industry, and yet also so little, because when you work for Reuters, it's very intimidating for people. So people are very hesitant to speak to you off the record or build relationships. But writing a book, you're writing a book. Oh, I want to be in a book. So suddenly all the doors open and people actually pick up the phone and answer when you call. So it really helped me to widen my network. So I left Reuters really to write this book called How Luxury Conquered the World, which is about telling the story of how this industry is only 40 years old. And there are only a couple of people who were really the entrepreneurs, the visionaries, who built this industry. And most books today are dedicated to designers, but not to the entrepreneurs, to the visionaries, the people who knew exactly what they were doing and who now, created empires employing hundreds of thousands of people, because you have the directly employed people, and then you have the whole sprawling network of suppliers, of consultants, of models. The fashion and luxury industry is a huge ecosystem from a business point of view. And it's therefore very, influential and important. So this book is an attempt to really talk about that amazing adventure that was building Hermes, building Louis Vuitton, planting flags, opening boutiques, dealing with the Communist Party, conquering America for Cartier, and Farfetch, which is this big online, Europe's response to Amazon, really, in the field of fashion. So it's really a book for people who are interested in the business of luxury, but beyond, because I also discuss, what's the notion of luxury? What does luxury mean? So anyway, I don't want to talk too much about this, but it's really an attempt to equip people with an understanding of that industry. And you have to understand the people first. And actually, it's one of my big ideas is people identify to people more than they do to ideas. So that's why it's a series of portraits, because if you understand a person's journey, then you understand the personality of the brand, you understand the strategy, you understand so many things. So that's an attempt to do that.
Wow, there was just so much to cover here, Astrid. So thank you for kind of painting the broad brush picture. And I would love to dig into at least a few parts of that canvas. One is just this point that you made about us relating to people and personalities, and when we, you think about all these brands like Hermes and Ferragamo and countless brands. We think of them as brands, and rarely do we, think of Ralph Lauren as it's actually
an old guy.
An old guy, and I've actually ridden in an elevator with him. That's the closest I've come to, But you don't think of the personality, at least personally, I don't. I think of the brand as the personality, and perhaps the brand is something that is almost it's an aspirational personality that each one of us wants to be. So one wants to show up in a particular brand so that it projects me in a certain way, and that way could be a high fashion brand or it could be a slovenly brand. Who knows? But each one of us is trying to say something with whatever products we've got. So tell us a little bit more about this notion of personality as you have written about them, and the brands that they have built and these fashion houses that they have built. What's the connection?
Well, I think, it took people with amazing audacity and courage to do the things that they did. I mean, I want to take the example of Alain-Dominique Perrin, who's the man who made Cartier what it is today. And it all started in 1969 with a lighter. And back then, Cartier was London, New York, Paris. They were different businesses, it was all the children who had inherited the business, then sold off to investors, and there were 3 different identities. And he really had a vision to make luxury accessible. Let's remember, if there wasn't the 70s, there wouldn't be luxury. And I'm going to get to this why. You see, fashion is a reflection of the time you live in. And back in the 70s, it was great to show off. It was great to show the world that you've made it. And he sensed that. And it started with the Cartier lighter, and then there were the sunglasses, and then there was the scarf, the accessories that were a bit expensive, but not inaccessible. And then people started to realize that, I'm a car dealer, but I got a great bonus. I'm going to get, this Cartier lighter or whatever, because I'm going to show off with it. And back then, he started what we understand now as the Big Bang parties. So Alain-Dominique Perrin went to the maker of France fighter jets, Dassault, Marcel Dassault, before Serge. And he said, I'm going to do the launch of the Santos watch at the Air and Space Museum, because Santos was one of the modern inventors of aviation and an amazing entrepreneur.
I'm sorry. I just need. Please go on. I'm just going to silence this thing.
And so Alain-Dominique Perrin asked Marcel Dassault for fighter jets. Why? Because he wanted to do this amazing Big Bang show and pick up stars all over Europe in these amazing jets, and they would disembark on the red carpet, and they would go into this amazing Air and Space Museum where there would be a laser show, and all the journalists would be there immortalizing the moment. We're talking, 1973, and and everybody who counted was there. I mean, Alain Delon, Gina Lollobrigida, all the stars of the time, the heroes, the racing heroes, the sports heroes, they were all there. And they were all photographed coming out of these amazing airplanes, these super sleek, and then going into the museum and the park. So he said, we didn't need any advertising for 6 months. And then we did the launch in New York with Andy Warhol, and then we did, and that was how they built the dream. And when people were buying that lighter, they were buying a bit of that dream because, Alain Delon also had the Santos watch. I also want the Santos watch. And that's how it started. And it's very interesting because he understood also that brands are really acting as ambassadors of a country. So they sell, the French way of living, maybe refinement, sophistication. The Italians will sell another idea, the British, and then it also comes to, what is American luxury? That's something I've been thinking about as well, because, a fashion brand, again, is a reflection of the place, the time you live in. And therefore, the people who were able to build these brands are people who captured the here and now, the zeitgeist, who were able to really express it through products and project images that are totally disconnected from the mundanities of everyday life, and just projected these ideals and perfect worlds that people wanted to identify with. So that's how really accessible luxury was born, with these, they were called the Cartier. So it was a collection because they were must-have.
Sure.
To be cool back then, because remember back then you were either in or you were out. And that's how it all began. That's how it all began. And then you have Jean-Louis Dumas with Hermès, who really celebrated the artisan. And he was the visionary. He thought, okay, we make saddles, we make handbags, and now we're going to make clothes. And he gave Hermès a style, the classic atemporal style. And Hermès today is the most desirable luxury brand. I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried to buy a Birkin or a Kelly handbag, but it's easier to go in the forest, kill a bear, and put the poor beast in front of your beautiful one and say, here's your present, my dear, because finding a Kelly or a Birkin is very difficult. But Jean-Louis Dumas was a poet. He was also an illustrator. And that's very interesting. Today, I find leaders who are very good are the ones who know how to tune into their staff and their people and be very clear about their ideas. And Jean-Louis Dumas could draw. So when he had an idea, he would draw the idea and people would get it immediately. And he also, of course, won many friendships by doing little drawings for people as well. But he was very much an amazing leader for that, because he had a vision of what Hermès should be. And it's still today, 20 years after he's gone, they're still following the same strategy, which I find quite interesting. And that's why I wanted to do this book. In French, we call it le devoir de mémoire, kind of your duty to remember. Remember who are the people who built this industry in order to understand what it's all about today. It's just like in diplomacy, you need to understand what happened in the past in order to understand what's happening today. And that's effectively what I did.
Fantastic. So let's go from the 70s, the past, to where we are now, right? So I'd like to kind of pick up 3 trends that I find interesting as they relate to the world of fashion. One is this is back in the time when we used to get on an airplane, as you have done, and fly to a different country and spend a few days there. It almost seems like an exotic thing to do these days. So I remember a few years back, I was in Shanghai, and just outside my hotel were several of these big fashion houses, their showrooms. And you kind of walk inside and they're all empty. They weren't empty, there were people there. But
There
they
were
were all,
sales assistants, but no clients, right?
well, there were sales assistants, there were some clients, but nobody was buying anything. And then I talked to some of the sales assistants as to, does anybody buy this stuff? Because it's really wonderful, some of the most magnificent buildings, for all the great fashion houses that many of the names you mentioned. And they said that actually there are no sales in those buildings. So it turns out that those buildings are primarily ways to create brand awareness among people who are in China. And then when people travel, they travel primarily to the European cities. That brand awareness stays with them, and then they buy from there. Or there's a ripoff, down the street, and you can buy a cheap version of the high-end product or whatever. So that's one trend, which is a growing middle class that is keen to have that aspirational lifestyle and be able to project that through the brand. And that is happening primarily from China, but also many other parts of the developing world, India and several others. That's kind of one trend. A second trend is, if you think about some of the most, the wealthiest people in the world who can afford a lot of luxury, they tend to wear hoodies and, kind of
Streetwear, yeah.
yeah, streetwear, right? So there's almost an anti-luxury look that they try to project. And so that's a second trend. I'm kind of wondering how that plays into.
I'd like to talk about that.
And then the third one is concern about the environment. What is fashion, in particular fast fashion? When you think about accessible fashion, fast fashion has been kind of the one trend that has made high-end fashion accessible. And then, so that has an environmental impact. And then there's an additional impact, which is a social and the societal impact. A lot of the fast fashion products are manufactured in places like Bangladesh, where the labor conditions, the work conditions aren't the greatest. So I know I've backed in a lot, but going from the 70s to where we are today and where we are going to be going, I'm curious about how you see the industry changing or adapting or getting ahead of some of these issues.
I think it's increasingly being held to account. And Miss Tweed's existence, raison d'être, is to hold the industry to account, because otherwise it thinks it can get away with murder. These are people, remember, who sometimes you feel that they're not on this planet, they're living in another world. And they have these amazing visions of grandeur and planting flags everywhere, and they're emperors of the world, and they run huge businesses, and they have really big egos. If you've seen some in technology, go check out fashion and luxury, you'll see the amazing egos. And they are increasingly being held to account precisely on several fronts. So the environment is one, but I can tell you there's a lot of greenwashing. And the other thing is that how do you reconcile the need to increase your sales, therefore use up more and more, natural resources, with the fact that actually your shareholders also say, yes, but you need to protect the environment. So how do you reconcile that need for constant growth when the Earth's resources are finite, right? Every year, thanks to COVID, we went back, I think it's August or July, when we've used up already all the world's resources, and everything after that until New Year's is debit, right? So there's a lot of effort, but it's really headline grabbing, and I think consumers are seeing that. I'll give you an example: organic cotton. There is no such thing as organic cotton. There's maybe 0.01% of the world cotton, in the world. And yet you have all these brands with organic cotton. Well, I wonder where they found it. The other thing is, I went to...
So what is organic? What's the definition?
Well, the definition, and again, that's a fuzzy area, because, the earth is supposed to have been without pesticides for at least 5 years, but, they stop 1 year and they're already called organic. And what you find is that there are all these certification companies that are paid 30,000-50,000 euros to put the, green or environmentally friendly stamp on your brand. And people will have a clear conscience, but nothing will really change fundamentally. When I went to India, I found out that there are more certificates of organic cotton being produced than there were actual tons of organic being produced. So what do you think is happening here? Well, maybe somebody is giving more certificates, yeah, and that tells you that there's a business to be in. So I think that there is some serious efforts being made, but I really question how committed these brands and groups are to really preserving natural resources when they're seeking constant growth. For me, that's the fundamental issue. And they continue to open shops. They continue to, there's a whole debate about fur. There's a whole debate about exotic skins. And Karl Lagerfeld put it beautifully. I will accept the debate about exotic skins when we'll have first settled the issue of leather. What's the difference between a mink and a veal? The mink is a cute little furry animal, so therefore people will want to save his life. But what about the veal? Oh, well, we eat it. Okay, so we're recycling, but so that's a whole debate that people are not yet ready to even tackle because they're living in this, world that's detached from reality. And I find that brands and consumers actually are really not falling for it that easily anymore. Another aspect is the social aspect. In fact, that's something I'm going to be doing some reporting on. But, people at Louis Vuitton who make bags, so people who make Hermes bags, or people who work for Chanel or Dior, the big brands, you would think they're paid huge salaries. No, they're not, because the company is exploiting the fact that they're working for such a prestigious name that socially, it makes them feel that they belong to this very prestigious community of luxury managers, and therefore they should accept a lower salary. But that's what I mean. The luxury industry thinks it can get away with it. And one of the reasons why I created this feed is because nearly every newspaper in the world depends on luxury advertising. And you don't have the car industry anymore, not that much. You still have a bit insurance, but you have cosmetics, you have fashion. So most media business models are based on advertising. So you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you, right? You're not going to say Louis Vuitton people are paid, $1,500 a year or a month. You can't write that because you're going to get this big budget from Louis Vuitton. So that's an issue. That's an issue. And I think they're not fully aware yet of all these issues. They're starting to grapple with them. And there are some earnest, really genuine, sincere efforts at improving things such as the environment, such as the social conditions. But it's got a long way to go. It's got a long way to go.
So is this an industry that is in decline?
No.
Okay.
Definitely not. In fact, you'd be amazed by the amount of cash that's chasing luxury assets today. Last year, there was an overreaction of the market when COVID hit. March 2020 was really when all the luxury stocks hit a trough. And since then, the recovery has been much faster than many expected. Already by, last summer, it was already improving. And then Christmas, and then really the pickup has been astonishing. So people have been valuing the resilience of this industry. Why? Also because when in these insecure times, people look for value for money, and they'd rather buy a brand, something of quality that's going to last much longer than, say, fast fashion. So it's buy less, but better. And I think the consumer now is very much about buying less, but buying better. But I have a bit of an issue with young people who, are vegan, want to save the world. That's fine. That's fine. But then they'll go to H&M and Zara, buy, $100 worth of clothes, and 6 weeks or 6 months later, they dump it in a landfill. Now, how do you reconcile that with wanting to save the planet? You see? But everybody, I mean, everyone has these contradictions, you
Sure.
know. But I think the fashion industry is waking up to the fact that they need to change. They need to change the packaging. They need to change, but they also need to make better lasting products so that we use fewer resources, and consumers need to be educated. Buy a pair of shoes that's $200, but you'll have it for 10 years. If you buy shoes for $80, you'll buy another pair next year. And I think that's slowly changing, and that's encouraging. But to come back to the future of luxury, there's also demographics here to play. I mean, China is producing more millionaires by the minute than any country in the world, more than the United States. I mean, I'm talking about speed. I'm not talking about absolute value, but just in terms of dynamics. The dynamics in China are amazing. And you also have the fact that they have this rising middle class that's coming to become very important in China. But you also have people who, you know, in it's the Asian mentality that it's called the Mianzi face. And I'm sure many of you know this, but in Asia, they have a much more communitarian view of the world, whereas we are much more individualistic. Yes. And me, myself, and I, and how do I fit in this world? Whereas for them, it's much more, in order for me to be successful, I need to be part of this community. And the worst thing you can do to somebody in Asia is insult them in public, whether it's your family, whether it's your company, whether, you know, it's professional or personal. It's just this death, instant death. Why? Because you will be ostracized. You will be kept outside of this community. And prosperity and success and happiness in Asia is thanks to the community. It doesn't happen alone. It's not an addition of many individuals. Is you being part of that group. So therefore, if I've made, you know, I don't know, 100 million because I sold this great app, mobile app, and I want to show the world that I've made it, I want to become a member of this community of successful people. So if the community of successful people say you got to wear a Rolex, well, I'm going to buy a Rolex. If the community says, well, Balenciaga is now all the, you know, cats meow, well, I'm going to get a Balenciaga bag. So you see these people queuing because they feel that they have to, because they want to be part of that community. And that's very important, because if you understand the future of that business and why are people investing in these companies and why is so much cash chasing these luxury assets, because they see that, they see all these people who continue to buy luxury goods.
Sure.
And now to talk about a very good point you made about streetwear. So I went to, in New York, I was just in New York, so I did the experiment of going to a couple of luxury stores. It's very interesting. There's nobody inside, but they'll make you wait in the cold. Sorry, madam, you have to wait. Like, there's nobody in the store. Madam, you have to wait. Okay. And then you get in, and there's actually maybe two people in the store, you see, in a corner. And then I asked to say, Dior, for example. So what is it that you sell the most? Sneakers. The $1,000 sneakers is what Dior sells.
Yeah.
A bit the handbags, of course, but it's the status symbols for, you know, the kind of rap hip hop community. Oh, the Dior high-rise sneakers is all the rage, and that's the new status symbol. You see, so I thought they were also keeping people out to make believe that there was people in the shop. I haven't gone down to the bottom of this because I didn't see many people in luxury shops like you were describing, you know, in China. But it was very interesting to go to these luxury shops because there's not that many people in them.
Yeah, sometimes I've actually seen some of these, you know, these streetwear shops. You know, there's literally a line snaking around the block, and I think they just sort of keep the doors shut so that the line gets longer. And as you're driving by, you say, "Oh, why are all these people waiting? This must be, you know, something that I also need to, you know, join the line because
yes,
there must be
absolutely. It's
something
like
pretty cool
nightclubs.
with it."
We all want to go to this club,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And there's it's face
Exactly.
control.
Yeah.
And Louis Vuitton used to be, basically why there were queues is because there are a lot of Asian people buying in Milan and Paris goods that were 30-40% cheaper because of taxes, right? And also because it's the real thing. And it's the trophy, the holiday trophy that you bring back, and you can, you know, it gives you bragging rights. You come back home and you say, hey, I got this Vuitton from the actual store on the Champs-Élysées. So this is, you know, and there's so much counterfeiting. So I think, you know, definitely demand is showing no sign of slowing down for luxury goods. Now also more and more people are buying online because they know the brand, they know the products, they know what they want. And the brands that are really, how can I say, profiting from COVID in a way, are those that woke up very quickly and turned their shop assistants into phone, sales assistants. And they were contacting clients directly more and more and saying, look, we've got a new collection, we have this happening, or how can I help you? And because they had business so easy for 20 years, let's think there were buses of Chinese coming in the shop, buying absolutely everything. They didn't have to do anything. Now the Chinese are gone, the buses are gone, the tourists are gone. So what do they need to do? They need to work with the local clients. So the brands that, LVMH brands are particularly good at that. Dior and Louis Vuitton. In 2 weeks, they were trained and they were out there talking to the local customer and organizing online events and really getting things going so that people remembered they existed. And, so that was quite interesting as a development.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have two questions and then we're going to open this up to the room. Question number one is COVID and post-COVID. Where are we headed in terms of fashion? During COVID, our fashion sense was primarily what can be visible shoulder and above. And post-COVID, we're sort of in this in-between phase. And it's possible that we may never go back to where we were pre-COVID. So is there a new direction of fashion where people are spending some time at work or in a public setting and the rest of the time at home and other settings? So our day-to-day lives may permanently change. So how is the industry responding or getting ahead of that? I've already seen, like in a lot of high fashion stores, instead of a traditional suit, at least a men's suit, you have the jacket, and then you basically have what looks like sweatpants, as part of the ensemble. So it seems like the industry has, adapted to the COVID sensibility, or post-COVID sensibility. That's question one. And question two is, tell us the story behind Miss Tweed, where that name comes from.
Okay. So before we go into that, I have to give you a really funny anecdote. Doesn't reflect well on me, but it's just too funny, I have to tell you. So, because we've spent our lives in front of screens. Yeah. So this part, as you were saying, is what counts. You forget about the bottom. And for about a year, I was live every week. I had a chronicle on a Belgian news channel. And they were like, Astrid, we're a bit late. So you have 10 more minutes. And actually I was exhausted. So I had a quick nap and I hadn't had time to dress. So I was there in my underwear and in front of the screen and all that. And then, so you have all the guests, of the TV set. Yes. And I went away. So they saw me going away in my underwear. So remember the bottom part.
Well, it may have been a fashion statement, who knows?
But can I tell you, they couldn't focus for the rest of the show because they were laughing about this vision of me in my underwear coming in and out of the show. So remember the bottom part. And so we've seen an explosion in loungewear, in these evening dresses that are very comfortable that you can wear inside. Stilettos is not what people are hurrying to buy, raising big questions about the future for Jimmy Choo and Louboutin and all these fancy stiletto makers. Menswear was really difficult because men don't buy suits anymore. I mean, not only before COVID, you had the kind of Silicon Valley, round neck, sweater, no tie, everyday's dressing down Friday, trend. And then after that, you have, I spend my life in sweatpants and PJs. More and more people are actually getting dressed and going into the office a few days a week now. And they're enjoying dressing up. And in fact, how you're dressed will affect how you feel and how you relate to your work. And I think that there will be still demand for formal wear, but maybe not at the levels we've seen pre-COVID. So maybe you don't need 10 suits, maybe you need 2. Maybe I don't need 15 cocktail dresses, maybe 3 is enough, you see? So aside from marriages, and there are not that many balls and events that you can go to wear these dresses. They hopefully will be back. But
unless the same people marry more times.
Yeah. But yeah. So I think that's a very interesting trend, and I think streetwear is kind of there, and then everybody's been doing sneakers, but I believe there will be a formal wear kind of, it's boomerang, what goes this way goes up, and I think formal attire is going to come back slowly but surely. We see it on the catwalk, but of course, Professor Helen Erickson with his cowboy boots and suits was just the trendsetter at Fletcher. I will always remember that. It's a statement, and I would quote Professor Helen Erickson and say, you think you're cool? Well, you have to check out his look. So about Miss Tweed, well, Miss Tweed, I wanted a name that was easy to remember, short. Musically, it's joyful. Miss Tweed, it's positive. Miss is my personal revenge against former French President François Hollande for having banned the use of mademoiselle. Back then, France had no other more important problem than to ban the use of mademoiselle, right? And I thought that was so unnecessary. So Miss is a way for mademoiselle to live on. Tweed is because it's Sherlock Holmes tweed and Chanel tweed. And Miss Tweed it's all that.
Okay.
It's all that. And the owl, which is the avatar, that's my logo, is because the owl has a 360 view. The owl is also a symbol of knowledge, of wisdom. I think also the goddess Athena had an owl. I'm a warrior as well. And for all these reasons, it was very coherent. And the owl is a snowy owl. It's an Arctic bird, and I'm a woman from the north.
Oh, wow.
So
okay, so many wonderful things coming together. And speaking of the owl, I think the owl is going to speak to us soon. So why don't we use this as the perfect jumping off point for opening this up for a conversation, as I'm sure so many of you have a reaction to questions. Let's start with somebody on screen, and then I'll come to those in the room. Can we see your hand of whichever color you choose? Yellow, brown. Do we have any hands up? Dorothy, can we?
We don't have any hands up on screen yet, so
Okay.
maybe we'll turn to the room.
Okay, let's turn to the room. Go ahead. And please introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you're studying here.
Hi, I'm Richard Offenbacher. I'm a first-year MIT student. Wonderful lecture, thank you so much. My question is regard to something that you mentioned early in or mid-conversation when you said that fashion seems to be going into a direction of buying pricier things with newer things. So how does that relate to sort of growth in the sense of how will luxury brands and clothing brands grow if you're not buying the 50 cocktail suits or the 5 Tom Ford suits and then the Ferragamo shoes? I don't know. What do you mind? You love the Ferragamo shoes. You can't move away from them. So how is there a contradiction there? How would that work?
well, I think demographics is the answer, because there's still a rising middle class, particularly in places like Asia, but Africa as well. So I think there will be continued demand for these brands. Now remember, they're not making millions from 4,000 handbags. They're making millions from the keychain, from the scarf, from the little wallet, this little piece of luxury that you're buying that you can afford, that makes maybe, I don't know, $40 to make, and they sell for 500. So you can imagine the margin. But there are a lot of people buying, for example, Vuitton expensive bags and Hermes bags, but there is really a sense of buying less but better, and that for me doesn't at all. It actually encourages people to buy luxury goods, and in fact, it's a responsible way of buying if you think about the environment. You see, because you're using fewer natural resources, so that is for me much more sustainable than buying Zara or fast fashion in so many ways. I've not bought any fast fashion for a number of years. I'd rather buy something a bit more expensive personally, but and I'm actually trying not to get ever my personal judgment affect my analysis, but this is an example where okay, I can use my own experience. And if you, that's what I mean. I don't understand these young people who want to save the world and continue to buy Zara.
Yeah, well, that's sort of a complex issue there, because you're also you're keeping an industry running in Bangladesh, for instance. So it's a much larger global industry.
Yeah, but they're paid $1 a day.
Exactly.
And I went to one of these sweatshops in India. It was just, it was horrible. I mean, they had maybe 500 people in a room, all drinking water, poorly working fans, and busy sewing. But they were grateful they had a job.
Yeah.
They were grateful they had a job because they had a meal once a day. And that's how difficult the situation is. So, I think brands have more and more of a social responsibility. Now, what's interesting is that last year, Chanel hired a human rights officer. Why? Because they want to make sure that the supply chain is squeaky clean. Because the supply chain is really where the weakness of a brand can come from, right? Because if somebody finds out that children actually worked on this dress, or the diamonds were mined by slaves, or so all this, they want to make sure that their supply chain is clean. So it's interesting to have a human rights officer, executive human rights officer at Chanel, of all places. And there are more and more of that. I haven't even mentioned inclusivity and women's rights and all that, and that's another thing, because brands understand they need to have a purpose.
Yeah.
But I think we don't need brands to tell us what to think. We just need brands to make us dream and dress well. And now they're lecturing us about what we should do or think. I think they've gone a bit overboard, and consumers are getting a bit bored by that. That's my impression. Any other questions?
Go here.
Yes.
Thanks. My name is Jeremy. I'm a second-year Mull student. My question is also related to the human rights issue with these brands, but kind of from a slightly different angle. I've read before about how a lot of autocrats and totalitarian rulers will use these brands to try to legitimate themselves on the world stage. Among their coterie, they'll buy all these fancy cars and fancy suits and so on, and that helps them give a sense of legitimacy at both at home and abroad. And I was wondering if there's been any attempt by these brands to try and reckon with that. With basically who's buying which autocrats, totalitarian leaders, and so on, or does that help their branding?
No, they don't care. I can tell you Lawrence Graf, who is, he's your classic rags to riches story, who went from a family of immigrants in East London, poor immigrants from East Europe and living in East London, who started working in a jewelry shop and then rose up the ladder, and then he was wining and dining the billionaires, selling them huge gems, and depending on the client the price would be different. He sold gems to the world's biggest tyrants, autocrats, ruthless leaders. He didn't care. What he cared about is how much this man or this woman is ready to pay for this stone. There are no qualms. And that's what's interesting about the luxury business, is that they will sell you anything. No matter who you are, they will sell you. If you want to buy something, they will sell it to you. They're not gonna be careful about who they sell. And what's interesting, and there would be really a Netflix series to write about this, is the notion of the Gravonder. So Graf, Chanel, all the great jewelry brands, Cartier, Bulgari, they have these people who live a very, high lifestyle, who only travel first class, and they are used to wining and dining billionaires. And it's a completely different world. But you need to live on a high life to know the body language so that you can talk to these billionaires to get them to buy these 20, 30, $50 million necklaces. And so they don't care if they killed thousands. They don't care. I've never heard anybody who said anything about that in about 20 years I've written about this industry. So I feel pretty comfortable saying that.
Okay.
In fact, if you wanted a Rolodex of all the tyrants, go to a luxury brand.
I have heard that I believe some of the sanctions package, for example, imposed on North Korea was a luxury goods sanction. So,
Oh, that's interesting. I
Yeah.
hadn't heard that. But, well, they'll get them anyway.
All right, on screen, we have a
On
question.
screen, we have Fernando. Fernando, unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Fernando. I am a Harvard student from Harvard, and I am living in the San Francisco area. I have a question with regards to the increasingly rapidly growing online luxury space. As we all know, or as some may know, there have been NFTs going around, and it's exploding in popularity, with like this recent NFT called Beeple selling for as much as almost $100 million in Christie's auctions earlier of this year. And so there's this growing explosion of like the online space, especially with Facebook changing its name to Meta in honor of the metaverse and so forth. So I want to ask, like, are there any trends you see where, in terms of like where the online space is going forward from here? Like, are there any techniques that you've been seeing lately as well? Like maybe online digital luxury items, or like sort of NFTs?
Absolutely. So, in fact, I just did a 2-part series on Miss Tweed. If you go on the website, you'll see in September, October, I did 2 big stories on that, on NFT and the luxury space. And basically, they see it as the future. Why? So there are different ways of looking at this, because you have the digital asset. So let's say that digital dress for your digital avatar. That's one thing, yes? And then, so because we spend more and more time in these virtual worlds, we want to have these cool virtual accessories to stand out from the crowd. So luxury brands definitely have a role to play, and they're already thinking about how to really stake out that, that market. Then second of all, you have NFTs that are really club memberships. So you scan the NFT, the QR code, and then you have access to all sorts of services offered by the brand, but it's also a way for the brand to build a one-to-one relationship with their customer. So they will say, dear Fernando, welcome to Dior. You bought this, pair of shoes, and with it came an NFT, which makes you a member of this exclusive club of people who have these amazing running shoes. And you will be invited to an amazing event, and we will let you know when the next pair of sneakers come out. You see? So it's really a dream for brands to build this one-to-one relationship that they started doing, as I was selling earlier, with their local clientele. It's just making it much easier for them. So of course it's just going to be a stampede, I think. But they still haven't figured out the strategy. Now let's remember, these are people that took 20 years to figure out the internet existed. Yes, I mean, you know, a lot of brands didn't sell on the internet thinking they didn't have the luxury experience of the store. You know, we believe in the boutiques. Well, guess what? The boutiques are closed. So what are you going to do? Okay, well, we sell on the internet. So many brands really upped the ante and really invested in e-commerce after, you know, after COVID. And after that, what happened is that brands then, okay, we missed the internet turn, and then there's, you know, the secondhand market that they completely missed out on. So now brands are realizing, okay, we missed out on internet, e-commerce, we missed out on the secondhand market. Let's not miss out on the NFT. You see, I think they're now realizing that but they're so slow. And we're talking about organizations that, you know, have a lot of committees, a lot of red tape. You know, you remember Monty Python? Let's have a meeting to discuss the next meeting. Well, there's a lot of that going on. And therefore, before they make a decision and a strategy, it will take a while, but they're all thinking about it. That's for sure. That was an excellent question. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
for the
you.
question. I guess that sort of sparks a question that I was meaning to ask you at some point, which is all the names that, you know, you're talking about, LVMH, Cartier, Hermes, it's all European names. I mean, enough already. The world is larger than Europe. So isn't this an opportunity for non-European? Of course, the streetwear is bringing in the Americans, but where are the Asian fashion you know, designers?
They're rising.
They're rising, and do the NFTs or some of these other kind of the non-traditional approaches to fashion, you know, open the door to a much more global fashion industry?
Yes, up to a point. You know, Asians still prefer European luxury to American luxury. I just did a story about Cartier versus Tiffany, and it's very much American luxury versus European luxury. And is there such a thing as American luxury? Well, yes, there is. Let's look at whiskey. Who would have thought that Japanese malt was the cat's meow 20 years ago? Right? Nobody could have predicted that. Well, I'm predicting that Tiffany is going to really rock and roll in the next few years because it's such a talent, you know, magnet, and it's really on fire. And they're going to reinvent the very notion of American luxury. Everybody saw the Beyonce and Jay-Z ad, right? And what was interesting about that ad? Normally, brands, they'll sell you a bracelet or a necklace. What did that brand sell? It sold a dream because nobody can buy that yellow diamond. Right, 123 carat or something, right? The famous yellow diamond, they were selling a dream. So I think American luxury is going to rise. I think Asian, Chinese, but not only Chinese, I think Malaysian, from other countries. Why? Because coming back to my point about the Comité Colbert, Russia, Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, they're doling out huge amounts to brands and to companies to hold fashion weeks, to celebrate their culture, to show the world that they also have things to say and to, you know, to share with the world and project their lifestyle. So there's more and more money. I mean, Russia is definitely spending a lot of money on culture and fashion. China is as well, Saudi Arabia, and France is, you know, giving out a bit of money, but that's what I mean. There's a lot of moaning in France because they say, well, hold on, these guys, you know, we're resting on our laurels, and we can see that because these guys are saying, look, when we've got this brand and that brand, and you know, so I think it will be interesting, and I'm welcoming the challenge of all these newcomers, and I think it's good because competition is good. That's what they teach at Fletcher, right? Competition is good and healthy, right? So I think that's a good trend.
Yeah, great. That's Hendricks.
At Fletcher, we also teach alliances. And my question is, it's an international relations-based question. Are alliances possible in the fashion world, or are brands inherently exclusive? I think of a few brands, if you call them that, like Fabergé, which had a Russian connection. My favorite dress designer is Christian Lacroix. Very colorful, I think a Caribbean, you know, flavor to it. You mentioned the Middle East, which has its own style. Maybe products can be complementary. You know, a firm that produces, say, dresses and so on might add shoes, but it might result in a kind of mishmash, a contradiction in
yeah,
terms.
yeah.
So are alliances possible? Are there examples of
Yes.
successful alliances as distinct from, say, takeovers?
No, they are. In fact, I just found out about one the other day. And that's going to be a little scoop for people who follow this industry. So I was speaking to somebody from a firm called Traub, T-A-R-A-U-B. They're a private equity firm and a consultancy based in New York. And the person I was speaking to was working for Lalique, which is a crystal maker dating back from end of 19th century, who was really the inventor of modern perfume bottles. And Lalique is partnering with Christophe, the silverware maker, and they've made alliances. They share shops, they share points of sale, and they don't have to have a cross shareholder agreement in order to build alliances. And definitely alliances is on the cards in terms of strategy, because the expenses are so big that you need to share the expenses so you can remain financially afloat. And boutiques are expensive. Media buying is another. And in fact, that's what I write about. I write about these grand maneuvers and strategies, but also alliances, because and there are camps in luxury. There's the LVMH camp, and then you have François-Henri Pinault carrying Gucci camp, and then you've got the Richemont camp, and they're all trying to steal people from poach talent from each other. And somebody's on the rise, the other's on the decline, and it's all going through cycles. But in this business, what goes around comes around, and it's very interesting because most people in the industry, they've all done, like, by the end of their career, they've worked for all the brands. They've been through them all. And you almost feel like they're interchangeable people, really, you see? And there's you wonder, that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges for the luxury industry is to let in fresh blood and new ideas. Because the people you see, for example, at LVMH, they all went to the same school, they all dress in the same way, they all spend their holiday in the same resorts. It's a very specific model. And then you've got the Kering, that's also quite specific. Richemont is more, boisterous. We love cars and women that smoke cigars. That's been the spirit. Every group has their own corporate culture. But people who survive in the industry is those who make alliances within companies or outside, you see. So it's just put human beings in groups, and that's what happens, right? It's just one of the fundamental natures of luxury. In fact, this book starts with a great preface by my friend Sylvain Tesson, who's a writer, and it starts with, one day a man put a feather in his head, and others looked at him admiringly, and then another one put another feather in his head that was bigger, and then another one put a feather that had more beautiful colors, and then suddenly the feather became the symbol of power. And the leader had the biggest feather with the brightest colors, you see? Because luxury is all about symbols. It's about telling the world who you are, you've made it, you're a leader, or you're successful. And the very notion of luxury draws to beauty. And in fact, some of these people who work for brands like Chanel, it's almost like they work for a sect. I was talking about how they were poorly paid. But that's because they think that they're really working for a dream. They're so happy to work. I mean, people don't leave Chanel. They say they die at Chanel or Hermes. And it's really jobs for life. And that's not always good, because you need to have fresh blood and fresh talent coming in to challenge preconceived ideas. And I find that it's very much, it's a closed world. And I see so many women who are 40 something who don't have children because they've given their life to the brand. They, no hubby, no, boyfriend, same for men, by the way, but a bit less, because there's a lot of women in fashion. In fact, today, if you're male, 40, heterosexual and Christian, you're not going to get, that top job. But if you're gay, if you're Black, if you're women, then the sky's the limit. That's another thing, because they've moved very dogmatic. We haven't talked about the all inclusivity thing, but they've really gone the other way. I mean, just too far, in my view. in my view. I mean, it's good because it is of course good, right? It was about time. But now all you see is black models. I mean, it's just gone the other way. I mean, it's fine. We should have models of all cultures, and that's not the issue, but it's just become such a priority. I mean, Burberry right now, for example, somebody was telling me that their ESG, environment, social governance, was the definition of who they are. But no, they make clothes. They make raincoats. So some companies, I feel, get a bit lost in this kind of need to be, the do-gooders of the world to save the planet. And they forget about just making good quality clothes and selling dreams. I find.
Yeah, so let's take a question from the screen. We're going to come back to the room. Let's take, what's the next question here?
The next question is from Maria. Maria, unmute yourself.
Hello, yes, hi. This question is actually on the chat. And they want to know how you feel about digital in luxury and what is a trend you feel is critical for a company to build to stay ahead.
How do you feel? Digital. Well, yeah, COVID, as I said, forced many luxury brands to embrace the new digital world order, as we call it. And I think they have built a much bigger presence, also in social networks. In fact, I'll tell you something. I used to be invited to all the shows, but now they invite only influencers. So because I'm a real journalist,
You're not an influencer?
I'm not an I don't have millions, because actually, if people look at my Instagram, I'm not very active. I should be, but I'm doing investigative reporting here. I'm talking to people sometimes at 2 a.m. I can't do interviews, talk to people, cross-check information, and feed the beast that is social media. And brands that have been quite innovative of digital have been doing well. But then you also have the example of Bottega Veneta that a few months ago shut all their social media channels. And of course, everybody's talking about it. So that was a very smart move, right? And then you've got brands putting out magazines and editorial content, and they've become media companies and entertainment companies. I mean, Chanel does films. Gucci was a few days, it was all the rage with the film coming out, and they just turned into entertainment companies. That's what they've become. And in fact, they're saving the film industry. There are a lot of filmmakers, thank God they're luxury brands, because they have employment and projects, really, honestly. So the luxury industry, it's not only becoming important because of jobs, but because of all these creatives that can live thanks to luxury brands. They make films, they like say, Mouton Cadet will have a great illustration on the bottle, or a collaboration with a Japanese artist for Vaflico champagne or cognac, or, it's all about collabs with artists. And the artistic world has been really living off luxury. I mean, if there's one industry that's been supporting that, community, is really the luxury industry. Hence, soft power is quite strong in that field.
So you can see product placement kind of in media, and now I shudder to think of what's going to happen when we are all part of the metaverse and digital luxury starts seeking into everything. So there are a whole bunch of questions here, gentleman back there, and then up here. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so we talked a lot, about.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. Sorry. My name is Matthew Curry. I'm a first-year mall student. Thank you for coming out here tonight. And I know we've talked a lot about this push that's been on fashion companies to act in a more responsible way. Do you believe that there is a particular group, whether it be consumers or shareholders, or perhaps even government, that is best positioned to be able to actually, put some pressure on them, be able to, persuade them to bring about some kind of change in the industry?
No, this tweet. It's my job. But I'm well wishing. I will always give company right of reply. I will never, put some corner somebody. I will always say, look, I've got this information. I'm putting out a huge scoop this Sunday, by the way, massive, about how I can't tell you, but it's a big group that's being attacked by a group, by some investors. And that's always quite interesting. And that's coming up this Sunday. But I find that there's I mean, your question is complex in a way, because governments, I mean, let's remember last year, I don't know if you guys followed this completely surreal story of LVMH getting the French government. I mean, I nearly called you, Professor Harrison, to talk about this, because this is insane. LVMH said they were going to buy Tiffany for X, and then COVID broke, and then they're like, oh, well, actually, Tiffany, it's badly run, it's worth less. And of course, Tiffany said, no, you signed a paper, you know, and you're supposed to pay this for Tiffany. So LVMH rang up Macron, thought, you know, went to Bercy, the finance ministry, who said no. I know this for a fact. They went to the Foreign Affairs Ministry, who said yes. Foreign Affairs Ministry sent a letter to LVMH asking LVMH not to proceed with the purchase of Tiffany, because they were in the middle of tariff negotiations on champagne and leather goods with America. Now, this is completely surreal, because why? This is a private company buying another private company. What did France have to do? What does the French government have to do with it? It's not a state-backed company, LVMH. It's a publicly listed company with a major shareholder, Bernard Arnault, who once in a while is the world's richest man, by the way, you know, between Jeff Bezos and him. And that was just surreal. And I can tell you another thing is that I had the spokesman of the finance ministry who says that when LVMH say that they never asked for that letter, let's put it mildly, it's not true. So strange things happen. And I don't think governments want to meddle with luxury groups. In fact, I would argue that they're even more powerful than governments. In fact, many companies, you feel that, you know, we saw that with California, you know, when under Trump, they were getting organized to respect the Paris Accords between themselves. I think the power of governments has really gone down dramatically in the past 20 years, and companies are taking destiny into their own hands and making change happen because they have the means, they have the drive, much more than governments who are, you know, a bit disorganized and frankly, you know, less efficient, right? So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that's good.
Hi, Astrid. My name is Nina. Thank you very much for coming here. I'm a first-year student. I was very happy that you mentioned Balenciaga. Being from the country of Georgia, it's especially exciting for me to know that
Demna
director Demna Gwasale is Georgian. I was curious if you had a chance to work on any of the stories related to Balenciaga, or if you find the company exciting, interesting. I know Demna Gwasale used the fashion platform as a platform for the political message. I know on his Facebook page, he seems to spread various details about the values that he has. He talked about sustainability. So how do you feel about Balenciaga? Do you think it's providing the new voice in maybe sustainable fashion or any other type of fashion?
I think, well, it's definitely red hot. And in fact, if there was one haute couture show to look at last July, it was the Balenciaga haute couture show. It was incredible. I mean, it was silent, no music. It was like it was. An honor to Cristobal Balenciaga. And Demna was smart. He said, I'm only going to do this every 2 years. And Demna really is audacious. He's what you expect a fashion brand to be, to think out of the box, to wow, to impress us. And I went to the boutique in New York. There were a lot of people in there, and there were a lot of things I would have bought. And it's on fire, this brand. This belongs to Kering. So Kering is Gucci, which by the way is a bit, yeah, I think people are seeing that it's plateauing. And Balenciaga just did a Simpson. So the Simpsons, they did a cartoon about Balenciaga. So that's luxury at its best, you see, being where you least expect them. in the Simpson cartoon. And that is great. That's creativity. That is really inspiring in many ways. I mean, it's very odd, right? It's very odd, but I think keeping a sense of humor and lightness, and that's what you expect from luxury brands. And when you see them lecturing us about this and that, I don't think you expect that from a luxury brand. In fact, if I can, I want to do a special report about Georgian fashion, because Tbilisi, and we were discussing it with Eric, is the place to be. I mean, a lot of Russian, people in Moscow and St. Petersburg, all the intelligentsia and the creative types, they've all bought a house or a flat in Tbilisi. It's where it's all happening. I mean, so it's bustling with ideas and creativity and entrepreneurs. The fashion scene there is one of the best east of the Ob River, frankly. And it's one of the most interesting places to be for all those reasons. So Demna is a great, poster child of that promise that has become Tbilisi in terms of creativity, ingenuity, audacity. So go Georgia.
You will have a fellow Fletcher in Georgia whenever you visit.
Oh, fantastic. Let's take one final question back there. Unless there any other, what's the screen look like, Dorothy?
We're clear on the screen. I
Okay.
think there's one more.
Okay, we'll take two and then we'll close. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Haley and I'm a second-year mold student. And I have a question about, you're talking about these developing countries, they are, purchasing more, but they're increasing middle class citizens and, have extraordinary purchasing powers. And this kind of putting these luxurious brands into a more, I will say vulnerable position, because they are more susceptible to criticisms. They are more affordable now. People can talk about it. It's good or not. It's not a dream anymore. So I'm wondering if these luxurious brands, they have a strategy or trend that it's going on that want to preserve the luxury status. So, for example, for wine and cheese in Europe, they have the certificates, and because people from these developing countries, at least from I know I'm from China, consumers doesn't really care the history behind it. I just see people are carrying this. I want to have the same thing. So it's kind of in a way, I guess, breaking or deteriorating the status that this brands have. So I don't know. I'm just curious if these brands are having any strategies except increasing their price tag.
No, I think, the smart leaders in the luxury field think long term. So brand equity is the priority. So you're not going to sell minus 50, 70% if you can avoid it, because that's how you kill your brand. But some managers put them stuff outlets and people buy, I won't name, but certain brands for at a big discount. And I think brands today are very scared of social media. And in fact, you can't say anything anymore, right? I mean, even the Tiffany ad campaign I mentioned, there's a lot of criticism because that diamond was mined by slaves 100-something years ago. And they said Beyonce was the first Black woman to wear it. Well, that was so inappropriate. It's just anything you do, you'll have people coming out and say, aha, there's your fault, or, you make this group of people unhappy. But as a result, nobody's saying anything anymore. I mean, brands have just become quite mute. What's the message, right? Aside from saving the world. But we expect, like Demna, a bit more creativity and audacity. There are still things to be said. In fact, I'm going to make an interesting remark. I went to the parade, the Halloween in New York, and I found it was so political. So you had people with posters, "Rise up before the water does." And you had a person with a huge string, "You're going to have third shots for the rest of your life." And eat the rich. It was amazing. I felt there was really, it was not only about Halloween, it was about telling the world, giving messages, and it was quite interesting. I never expected that from the Halloween parade in the village in New York. So that was quite interesting. Yes, there was another question like that. Yes.
Hi, I'm Shara. I'm also a first year mall student. I think you have touched upon a lot of what my question is. And so I'm from India, and there is the wedding market in India is really
Yes,
huge.
yes.
And there's this designer called Sabyasachi, and he recently put out an ad on Mangal Sutras, which is it's a sacred thread which a woman wears on her marriage. And he put out an ad where it was a same-sex marriage, showing that both females are wearing it, and there was a huge uproar against it.
Of course.
Do
Yeah.
you think, like that being said, do you think luxury brands of that sort, or any luxury brands, should be leading the way in social political issues, or should, like you said, be mute or not do anything about it?
I think
You also mentioned about
yeah.
how you did mention about how companies are much more systematic and organized than governments. Should they be leading the way instead?
It's an interesting question. I think it's a dangerous game to play because, for example, there's some traditional parts of India that are going to be shocked, like Russia. I nearly died because I was attacked by 3 people in Russia because they thought I was pro-gay. Yeah, right. So it took me 3 months to recover from that, but that's the reality. And the reality is brands need to be very careful about not alienating certain groups of people and beliefs. And there are still conservative people out there who have their own values, and it's fine. I mean, that's the plurality of thought that we encourage as well in the school. So I think it's a slippery slope. I mean, at Miss Tweed, I'm never going to write about sexual orientation, race, religion. There's certain man-women relationships. I stay out of that. There's so many other things we can talk about, and that fashion can talk about. I mean, there's so many super interesting topics and things to be said about the world we live in that I don't think you need to constantly go into these very controversial and painful topics for many people. There's so many gay people who suffer in the world today. I mean, in Russia and in Arabic countries, I was having dinner with Royal Highness from Qatar, who's helping the gay population there, survive because they're ostracized and criticized. So, I don't think brands should become the United Nations. I don't think brands should do that. I think there are government and non-governmental organizations to do that. I just think make us dream and look sharp and stylish. That's all we ask from them. And not pollute the world too much.
I guess, kind of to leave on a note of, kind of let's scratch our heads and then think a little bit more about it. Just given the visibility that brands have, given their ability to persuade, given their ability, as you said, to dream. And part of the dream is to have a world that is better than, whatever you feel.
Or keeping what we have.
And keeping what we have. So one could argue that the fashion brands, the luxury brands, do have a perch, a very visible perch, and potentially they can be a lot more influential than a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola, which is kind of more of a mass product.
Yeah.
So, perhaps one could make the argument that this responsibility should sit even more heavily on their shoulders, potentially, because they are aspirational, and part of the aspiration is to do. So I guess this is a discussion that we can continue to have. I mean,
that's quite interesting. You're a very good point. And Dior has been very much about all women should be feminists, and about that. I want to do a T-shirt that says "Love your men." I mean, I'm all for feminism and I'm all for women's rights. And I think there's a lot of, as Hillary Clinton was saying, there's a lot of unfinished business when it comes to, women's affairs.
Yeah.
But I think it's gone also a bit too far about how about letting men being men
Mm.
So that's maybe a good way to solve it before we get to any more controversy.
Yeah, I guess now that we are on controversial topics, I'll close with a question for you. Given that you have been in the world of branding and luxury, one could say that the Fletcher education is a luxury product. And
Very
we've
much
been spending a lot of time the last year or so just thinking about the Fletcher brand.
Oh, yeah.
I know we don't have another 3 hours to spend on this, but do you have 30 seconds to give us any advice on the Fletcher brand?
The Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. My answer.
Okay, all right, on that note, thank you so much, Astrid.
People are interested, so I've closed Miss Tweed's account with Amazon because they're horrible people. They send me bills for services I never asked for. They're horrible to their staff, and I don't want ever to do anything with them again. My book will be only sold at Albertine in New York, where I'm doing a world launch of Miss Tweed's first year book, which is there. I only have 9 copies, and I only have a few copies of How Luxury Conquered the World, and I have 1, I think, or 2 French copies if people are interested. So if people are interested, go see Irina there, who's will be my kind of say human cash machine or cash register. Sorry. But you know, if I'm just saying, if you want the book, it's kind of now or never. Sorry to say this, but it might be reprinted. It might be sold by a distributor, but anyway.
Well, and no visit to Fletcher would be complete without our own haute couture.
Whoa.
In orange. So it is my honor to give you our version.
Wow.
Fletcher goodie.
Ooh. Thank you
No,
so
no
much.
fashion in there per se, but our branding for sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, it was fun, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.